She said, "You'd never have the guts to leave me." When she got home, the house was empty, the bank account was frozen, and her car keys didn't work anymore. My name is Owen, and if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have sworn my life was moving in the exact direction I wanted. I had a steady job at an engineering firm, a modest house that I'd inherited from my grandfather, and a fiancée named Celine who, at the time, I believed was the center of my universe. Everyone around me seemed to envy what we had. The house, the plans for a summer wedding, the future we talked about late at night when the world was quiet. But illusions are tricky. They can last for years, even when tiny cracks have already started to form. And mine broke on a night I'll never forget, when Celine, during one of her usual tirades, looked at me with this cold smirk and said, "You'd never have the guts to leave me." It was meant as a jab, just another knife tossed in an argument, but it stuck in me like a splinter. Because in that moment, I realized she truly believed it. In her mind, I was the safe, predictable man who would never walk away, no matter what she did. That thought gnawed at me. At first, I tried to brush it off. Couples fight, right? Sometimes harsh words slip out. I told myself not to take it too seriously. But then I started noticing things I had ignored before. Celine had these work trips that kept multiplying. They always came with vague explanations, team-building retreats, conferences, client meetings in nearby cities. I used to believe them because I trusted her. But now, I began paying attention to the details. She never brought back souvenirs or work materials. Her clothes smelled faintly of cologne I didn't own. And then there were the phone calls she'd take outside. Her voice lowered, her laugh sharper and more playful than it ever was with me. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But the truth was, I'd been ignoring her patterns for too long. The next crack came through our finances. We had a joint account for bills, groceries, and wedding expenses. I used to check it casually, just to make sure everything lined up. But one Friday evening, after her supposed client dinner, I noticed the balance was much lower than it should have been. Almost $1,800 had been transferred out within the last 2 weeks. When I asked her about it, she snapped instantly, accusing me of micromanaging and not trusting her. She waved it off as wedding-related deposits, photographer, florist, catering samples. Except none of those businesses showed up on the statements. Instead, the money went to generic online transfers and payments I couldn't trace. I didn't push further that night, but something shifted in me. That splinter from her words, "You'd never have the guts," dug deeper. I started watching more closely, quietly, carefully. One afternoon, while she was at the gym, I looked at her laptop. It wasn't snooping, I told myself. It was survival. What I found wasn't a smoking gun, no steamy emails or incriminating photos, but it was enough. Spreadsheets of her personal expenses, separate from ours. Flights booked under her name, not for business, but for personal leisure. Strange entries labeled backup savings that she had clearly kept hidden from me. She was siphoning money out of our account while building a private escape fund. That was the moment my denial collapsed. I didn't confront her right away. I knew Celine too well. If I pushed her without proof, she'd flip the script, make me the villain, and maybe even convince others I was paranoid or controlling. She had a way of twisting words until reality bent in her favor. So instead, I stayed calm. I played the role of the dependable fiancé. I asked her about flowers and venue dates, even though I had no intention of walking down that aisle. I cooked dinners, watched movies with her, and let her believe nothing had changed. But inside, I was building something. Not revenge, not yet. Preparation. The plan started with the house. It was in my name alone. Thankfully, my grandfather's foresight kept it that way. But Celine had always acted like it was our place, decorating, rearranging, inviting friends over, as if she co-owned the walls. She even joked once that if I ever tried to throw her out, she'd take half anyway. That joke replayed in my head late at night. I called an old family lawyer, someone I trusted, and explained everything. He didn't seem surprised. He'd seen plenty of situations like mine. He helped me draft paperwork, not divorce papers since we weren't married yet, but documents that would secure everything I owned and cut her off from anything shared. Bank accounts, car title transfers, even utilities. Slowly, piece by piece, I tightened the net. During this time, I started noticing her behavior more clearly. Without the haze of love and denial, her actions looked different. She'd leave for her work trips and come back with a new piece of jewelry. She'd spend hours texting with someone, face lit by the screen, then flip it down when I walked by. Her laughter, once my favorite sound, now grated against me because I realized it was rarely for me anymore. And yet, she kept repeating that same line whenever arguments flared. "You'd never leave me." It became almost a mantra. She believed I was weak, too tied to her, too scared of starting over. And maybe I had been, once. But not anymore. The breaking point came one Saturday. Celine claimed she had to fly out for a regional training seminar. She packed a small suitcase, kissed me absent-mindedly, and left. That night, I got a message from my cousin, who worked part-time at a hotel downtown. He sent me a photo of Celine walking through the lobby with a man I'd never seen before. They looked comfortable, laughing, brushing hands, like two people who had done this plenty of times. I stared at that photo for a long time, not with shock anymore, but with a strange, cold clarity. She wasn't just planning an escape. She was already living it. I didn't go to the hotel. I didn't storm in or scream or make a scene. That would have given her the drama she craved, the chance to twist the narrative and paint herself as the victim. Instead, I waited. I waited for her to come home, tired and smug from her seminar. I waited for her to toss her suitcase into the corner and flop on the couch like nothing had happened. And that's exactly what she did. Except by then, my plan was already in motion. I started withdrawing from her emotionally, but in ways she couldn't measure. I'd nod when she talked about the wedding, but I stopped adding input. I agreed when she made decisions, but I no longer cared. I was present physically but absent mentally, storing every ounce of my energy for what was coming. Over the next few weeks, I transferred our savings into an account under my name only. I changed the locks quietly, had spare keys cut for myself, but not her. I rerouted my paycheck to bypass the joint account. By the time she noticed anything, it would be too late. One night, while she was asleep, I stood in the living room staring at the photos of us on the wall. Engagement parties, vacations, the smiles we showed everyone. They looked hollow to me now, like stage props from a play I no longer wanted to act in. That was the night I made the final decision. I wasn't just going to leave Celine. I was going to leave her in a way she never expected. If she truly believed I didn't have the guts, then I'd make sure the last thing she remembered about me was how wrong she was. When she came home from her next business trip, she'd find the house empty. Not just me gone, but everything she relied on. Frozen accounts, no car, no keys, no safety net. The illusion she built would collapse in a single blow. And the best part? She would never see it coming. When the day finally came, it didn't look dramatic from the outside. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind of day where nothing extraordinary is supposed to happen. Celine had flown out the night before for what she described as another team-building workshop. I didn't bother pretending to believe her anymore. Instead, I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the boxes I had stacked neatly by the door. The house looked hollow. The framed photos were gone. My clothes and belongings had already been loaded into a storage unit under my name. Even the dishes were boxed up. It wasn't just me leaving. It was me erasing myself from the life Celine thought she owned. By noon, the movers I'd hired finished the last load. I signed the papers, locked the door behind me, and walked away. For the first time in years, I felt light. That evening, I sat in a motel a few towns over, waiting. I knew Celine's flight was scheduled to land around 9. She'd grab an Uber, swing by the house, and expect the same scene she always returned to. Me waiting, the lights on, maybe dinner half prepped in the kitchen. Instead, she would walk into silence. I pictured it. The sound of her heels clicking on the tile, the way she'd drop her suitcase by the door, expecting me to pick it up later. Then the pause, the realization, the missing furniture, the empty shelves, the sudden hollowness pressing in around her. It wasn't petty, not to me. It was precise. She'd spent months assuming I'd never leave, draining money and sneaking around behind my back. Now she would feel the void she left in me, mirrored perfectly in the space around her. My phone buzzed around 9:45 p.m. Celine's number lit up the screen. I didn't answer. She called again, and again. By midnight, I had 11 missed calls and 4 voicemails. I didn't listen. Instead, I logged into the joint bank account one last time. It was empty, locked under my name. The funds already transferred weeks earlier. When she tried to use her card, it would be declined. And the car? That was the cherry on top. The title had always been in my name, something she conveniently forgot when she bragged to her friends about her car. I'd had the locks reprogrammed the day before. Her keys, the ones she left dangling on the kitchen hook, wouldn't start the engine anymore. I leaned back in the motel chair, closed my eyes, and imagined her face when she realized every layer of her security was gone. The next morning, my cousin texted me. He worked at a coffee shop downtown, where Celine sometimes stopped before work. She came in this morning, his message read. Looked like a storm. Tried her card, got declined. Left in a hurry. Barely said a word. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I could picture it so vividly. Celine, who thrived on control and appearances, suddenly losing her grip in public. But the best was yet to come. Celine wasn't the type to sit quietly in chaos. She started calling around. Mutual friends, her co-workers, even my sister. She spun stories quickly, painting me as unstable, claiming I had abandoned her suddenly, leaving her stranded with nothing. Normally, I would have been worried about how people saw me. But this time I was ready. Before I disappeared, I had left fragments of the truth in carefully chosen places. Copies of her secret spreadsheets, screenshots of transfers she thought I didn't know about, even the hotel photo my cousin had sent me. I hadn't plastered them everywhere. That would have been vindictive, but I had given them to a few people who mattered. So when Celine cried to them about how heartless I was, they already knew she wasn't the victim. By Friday, my sister called me. "She's burning bridges fast," she said. "People aren't buying her act. She tried to say you stole money from her, but when she couldn't explain her own transfers, she got defensive. Honestly, Owen, it's falling apart for her." Hearing that, I felt no guilt. For months, I'd been the fool, the dependable man she counted on while she chipped away at me. Now she was learning how it felt when the ground disappeared under her feet. Celine, of course, wasn't done. On Saturday morning, she showed up at my motel. I didn't tell her where I was, but she must have dug through enough people to find out. When I opened the curtain, she was standing in the parking lot, dressed to impress but unraveling at the edges, hair messy, makeup smudged, her phone clenched like a weapon. She hammered on my door for 15 minutes. I stayed silent. Eventually, she shouted through the door, accusing me of cowardice, promising she'd ruin me if I didn't open up. I leaned back in the chair, sipping stale motel coffee, letting her words bounce off the wood. For once, she was the one outside, powerless, begging for entry. When she finally stormed off, tires squealing, I knew she was running out of moves. What Celine didn't realize yet was how small her world had become. Her so-called work trips were known now. The man she'd been sneaking around with, whose name I eventually learned was Tyler, wasn't going to step in and rescue her. He had his own life, his own reputation to protect. As soon as whispers started spreading, he distanced himself. Celine wasn't the exciting secret anymore. She was the liability. And financially, she was cornered. Her credit cards were maxed out, her secret accounts drained by her own spending, and the joint account frozen. She had built her independence on sand, and now the tide was in. The fallout spread faster than I expected. Celine's closest friend, Harper, called me one evening. "She told me you abandoned her, Owen," she said. "But then she tried to borrow money from me. She's desperate. And honestly, I don't trust her anymore." That was the theme I kept hearing. People who once defended Celine now wanted nothing to do with her. Her charm only worked when she had control. Without it, her mask cracked. Meanwhile, I felt freer than I had in years. I rented a small apartment closer to work, nothing fancy, but mine. I started running again, something I'd abandoned when Celine complained about me being too sweaty after long jogs. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen because she always controlled our schedules. It was like stepping into sunlight after years underground. But I knew this was only the beginning. Celine wasn't the type to disappear quietly. She still had one weapon left, the story she could spin, and she was about to try and use it against me. The first sign came 2 weeks later. My manager at work pulled me aside after a meeting. "Owen," he said, "is everything okay at home? We got a strange call from someone claiming you were unstable, that you'd walked out on your fiancée and stolen money." I didn't need to guess who it was. I showed him the documents I had prepared, the account statements, the lawyer's paperwork, proof that everything I'd done was legal and in my name. He looked through it quietly, then handed it back. "Don't worry," he said. "We won't entertain any more of her calls." Celine had tried to poison the one place she thought I couldn't defend myself. And she'd failed. That night, I thought back to the last time she'd mocked me with those words. "You'd never have the guts to leave me." She had believed it so fully that she never prepared for the possibility of me actually walking away. And now, every move she made was reactive, desperate, clumsy. I wasn't chasing her anymore. I wasn't proving anything. I was simply letting her world collapse under the weight of her own choices. The emptiness she walked into that night, the bare house, the frozen account, the useless car keys, was only the first taste. Her real punishment was just beginning. The thing about people like Celine is that they don't stop when the first blow lands. They scramble, claw, and grasp for whatever power is left, convinced they can rebuild the illusion. For a while, I expected her to vanish quietly, maybe lick her wounds and move on with someone else. But that wasn't Celine. She didn't know how to retreat. Instead, she tried to rewrite the story. At first, it was whispers. Mutual friends would call me and say she'd been telling people I'd spiraled, that I had anger issues, that I couldn't handle stress, that she had been the one holding everything together. She even dropped hints that I might have been abusive, though never directly, just enough poison in the air to make people wonder. But every time she tried, she forgot one thing. I hadn't left without evidence. The lawyer had advised me early on, "Don't burn her in public, Owen. Just protect yourself." let her unravel on her own. So I hadn't spread anything widely. I'd only given proof to the people who truly mattered, my family, my closest friends, a few mutual contacts who had asked questions. So when Celine's accusations started, they already knew better. They saw through it. And instead of sympathy, she got skepticism. Her circle shrank quickly. Harper, who had once been her ride or die, started keeping her distance. My sister told me Harper had found out Celine had borrowed money under false pretenses, promising to pay it back when Owen's paycheck clears. Except there was no paycheck clearing anymore, not into anything she could touch. Then came the coworkers. Celine had always been the one who flaunted her life at the office, showing off jewelry, bragging about our dream wedding, talking about vacations we never actually took. When the facade cracked, people noticed. She had no photos from her supposed trips, no savings to back up her lifestyle. The man she'd been sneaking around with, Tyler, stopped coming around entirely. He'd realized being tied to her was like carrying a lit match into a gas station. Within a month, Celine wasn't just embarrassed. She was radioactive. Meanwhile, my life was stabilizing. The apartment I rented was small but comfortable. I kept it minimal, something Celine would have hated. I started going to the gym after work, building routines that belonged only to me. My friends came around more often, surprised to see how much lighter I seemed without her. I even got an unexpected promotion at work. My manager, the same one Celine had tried to poison against me, told me he admired how I handled the chaos with composure. Most people in your situation would have melted down, he said. You just kept showing up, doing the job. Hearing that meant more than I admitted out loud. For the first time in years, my worth wasn't tied to Celine's approval or her version of reality. It was my own. Celine, however, wasn't done. One evening, I got a call from Harper. She tried to crash a dinner I was at, Harper said, her voice low, as if she still couldn't believe it. She walked in like nothing had happened, ordered drinks on someone else's tab, and started badmouthing you again. Nobody bought it. Someone finally told her to leave. She left crying. I could almost see it. Celine standing there, desperate to regain her old control, only to realize the room no longer belonged to her. The woman who once strutted through life, confident she could manipulate anyone, was now the subject of pity. And for someone like Celine, pity was worse than hatred. But karma wasn't finished with her. One Saturday morning, I got an envelope in the mail. Inside were debt notices, not in my name. Thankfully, I had cut every financial tie before I walked out. But Celine's name was on all of them. Credit cards maxed out, late fees piling, collection agencies circling. She had built her life on borrowed money, assuming my steady income would always be there to patch the holes. Without me, the dam burst. I set the letters down and stared at them for a long time. For years, I'd been the one managing her messes, covering bills, smoothing over her mistakes, calming her storms. Now the storms were hers alone. And the strangest part? I felt nothing but calm. The next major collapse came when she tried to show up at my family's house. My mom called me afterward, furious. She came banging on the door, Owen, screaming about how you ruined her, how she deserved half of everything. We told her to leave, but she wouldn't. We almost had to call the police. I wasn't surprised. Celine had always believed she could charm my parents, make them side with her no matter what. She used to say things like, "Your mom loves me more than she loves you." And maybe, at one time, I believed it. But that night, my parents made it clear, they saw through her. They told her flat out, she wasn't welcome anymore. That was a line Celine never thought they'd cross. And losing that last shred of influence over my family seemed to hit her harder than anything else. From then on, I started hearing stories. She had tried to move in with a friend, but the friend kicked her out after Celine tried to control the household. She showed up at Tyler's apartment, but his roommate reportedly told her she wasn't welcome there either. Each door she tried to open closed in her face. And yet, even in her downfall, she couldn't admit fault. To anyone who would listen, she painted herself as a victim of betrayal. But the circle of people listening grew smaller and smaller until it was barely anyone at all. I should have felt vindicated. And in some ways, I did. But more than that, I felt detached, like I was watching her through a glass wall. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about inevitability. Celine had built her life on manipulation and control, on believing she was untouchable. Once the foundation cracked, the whole structure collapsed faster than I could have imagined. And every piece of it was her own doing. But the final act was still waiting. I didn't expect her to come crawling back, not after all the venom she'd thrown my way. But desperation makes people do strange things. It started with texts. Short, clipped, almost polite. "Can we talk? I think we should settle this like adults. You owe me a conversation." I ignored them. Then the call started. Dozens in a row, voicemails piling up. Her voice shifted from angry to pleading. At one point, She cried into the phone about how she had nowhere to go. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to pity. But I pushed it down. Pity was the hook she wanted me to bite. When she finally tracked me down in person, cornering me outside my office, I knew the final confrontation was here. She looked nothing like the Celine I remembered. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair messy, her makeup streaked. The confident, calculating woman who once told me I'd never have the guts to leave her now looked like someone barely holding herself together. "Owen," she said, her voice raw. "We need to talk." I stood there, steady, while she poured out excuses. She hadn't meant to betray me. She was just scared of being dependent. She thought I'd never really leave. She begged me to come back, or at least to give her money, to get back on her feet. For a moment, I almost laughed. The audacity was staggering. I didn't yell. I didn't insult her. I simply handed her an envelope I had prepared weeks earlier. Inside were copies of the documents proving everything. My sole ownership of the house, the bank transfers, the car title. "This is everything," I said quietly. "You don't own me. You don't own a piece of me. And you never will again." Her face went pale as she flipped through the papers. She tried to argue, tried to twist it, but the words caught in her throat. For once, she had no angle left. I walked away, leaving her standing there in the cold, clutching the envelope like a lifeline. That was the moment I realized the collapse was complete. But karma wasn't finished. The consequences that followed were harsher than anything I could have orchestrated. Celine's debts grew into lawsuits. She bounced from couch to couch, each time burning another bridge. She lost her job after missing too many days and showing up erratic. The last I heard, she was working odd shifts at a diner across town, a shell of the woman who once strutted through life like she owned it. She had told me once, "You'd never have the guts to leave me." But in the end, it wasn't me who lacked guts. It was her. By the time Celine cornered me outside my office, clutching that envelope of documents, I knew her fight was over. But the thing about endings is that they don't happen in one clean cut. They unravel in layers, and every layer hurts worse than the one before. For Celine, that unraveling came fast. The weeks after our confrontation were eerily quiet. I half expected her to lash out again, but she didn't. Instead, I started hearing about her through whispers. She tried to get a new apartment, but her credit score had tanked. The landlord rejected her application. She bounced between spare rooms at friends' places until even those dried up. Every time, she burned the bridge, lying, manipulating, or taking advantage of whoever helped her. It was almost poetic. She used to float effortlessly between social circles, always the life of the party, always the one who seemed to have everything. Now she was reduced to knocking on doors, begging for temporary refuge. And each door slammed faster than the last. The financial fallout was worse. Those debt notices I'd seen before multiplied. Collection agencies called relentlessly. Without my income to cover the gaps, she drowned under the weight of her own lifestyle. The designer clothes, the trips, the dinners she'd once flaunted, none of them were paid off. Now they all came due. One night, Harper called me. She asked me to co-sign a loan, she said, exasperated. Can you believe that? After everything. I shook my head. Celine wasn't asking for help. She was looking for another life raft, another person to tether herself to while she pulled them under. But this time, no one was willing. Then came Tyler. I didn't hear the full story until months later, but apparently Celine had tried to cling to him as her last option. She showed up at his apartment, claiming I had ruined her life and she needed him. But Tyler wasn't interested anymore. He had moved on. Worse, word had gotten out about their affair, thanks in part to a few well-placed fragments of truth I'd left behind. His colleagues knew. His girlfriend, yes, he already had one on the side, found out. Celine wasn't a secret thrill anymore. She was a liability. He cut ties immediately. For someone like Celine, who thrived on being wanted, that rejection was a deeper wound than any financial loss. As for me, my life expanded in the exact opposite direction. At work, my promotion solidified into a leadership role. My manager trusted me with bigger projects, and for the first time in years, I felt valued for what I could do, not for what I could provide someone else. My family, who had once looked at Celine with admiration, now told me openly how proud they were that I walked away. My mom even said, "I used to think you needed her, Owen. But the truth is, she needed you. And without you, she's nothing." It wasn't meant cruelly, but it struck me hard. Because she was right. I didn't gloat, though. That was the strange part. When I thought about Celine, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a quiet, steady certainty. She had dug her own grave, one reckless choice at a time. All I did was step aside and let her fall in. But karma wasn't finished. It had one last act waiting for her. It happened about 6 months later. I was at a cafe downtown, working on my laptop, when I saw her through the window. Celine. She was in uniform, a diner apron, hair pulled back hastily, her once expensive heels replaced with worn sneakers. She carried a tray, balancing plates with the same grace she once used to command rooms. Only now, there was no audience. I didn't go in. I didn't confront her. I just watched from a distance. And what struck me wasn't satisfaction, but how small she looked. This was the woman who told me I'd never have the guts to leave. The woman who believed she was untouchable. Now she was serving coffee to strangers who didn't know or care who she used to be. And for the first time, I realized her words had been more about her than me. She couldn't imagine leaving me because she had never had the guts to stand on her own. That night, I thought back to the beginning. To the house, the fights, the smirk on her face when she mocked me. I remembered how trapped I felt, how convinced I was that leaving her would be impossible. And yet, here I was. Free, stable, stronger than ever. She was wrong. I did have the guts. And the irony was, by the time she realized it, she had already lost everything. The consequences didn't stop there. Within a year, Celine's debts pushed her into filing for bankruptcy. The car she once flaunted had been repossessed. The wedding she used to brag about became a ghost story among our mutual friends. Remember when Celine was planning that huge wedding? What happened to that? What happened was simple. The truth caught up. She tried to rebuild, tried to reinvent herself in different circles, but the reputation followed her. You can only lie so many times before the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Employers Googled her name and hesitated. Friends introduced her cautiously, if at all. Celine became the cautionary tale she once mocked others for being. And me? I stayed in my lane. I built my career, nurtured friendships, and eventually, after a long time, started dating again. But this time, I moved carefully. I knew what manipulation looked like now. I knew what it felt like to be drained slowly until nothing was left. I promised myself I'd never ignore those cracks again. The final time I saw Celine was almost anticlimactic. I was at the grocery store, grabbing a few things after work, when I spotted her in the checkout line ahead of me. She was alone, hair pulled into a messy bun, eyes tired. She glanced back once, saw me, and froze. For a moment, I thought she might approach. Maybe to apologize, maybe to lash out one last time. But instead, she looked down, paid for her groceries with crumpled cash, and hurried out. No words, no confrontation, just silence. And in that silence, I understood, her story was over. At least for me. Walking back to my car, I thought about the phrase that had started it all. You'd never have the guts to leave me. It had been her greatest mistake, underestimating me. She built her empire of lies on the belief that I would always be there to hold it up. When I walked away, the whole structure came crashing down. And that was the hardest karma of all. Not that I destroyed her, but that she destroyed herself. And I simply refused to catch her as she fell. In the end, Celine became a ghost in my life. A reminder of who I used to be and who I refused to become again. And me? I learned that sometimes the most brutal revenge isn't loud or messy. Sometimes it's as simple as walking away, leaving the house empty, the accounts frozen, the car keys useless. Sometimes the quietest exit is the one that echoes the loudest. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story? It's even worse than this one.